And that's really what got me into homeopathy was the potential for addressing suffering at its root.
Welcome back to Homeopathy Hangout, where today we have technically our second time that you're on the podcast, Adam. We've got the lovely Adam Fiore from Montreal in Canada. Welcome.
It was through a shocking traumatic illness that led to my body expressing in a disease, if you will. At that time, I think I was 16, and the advice we got from the practitioners at that time, the doctors at that time, was a little somber, to say the least. And she brought me to homeopaths and Chinese doctors and kind of got me on the road, really. At that time, I didn't realize what I was taking or, and the philosophy behind it, of course, but it really sparked a whole healing journey from the age of 16 and up until now, and ongoing, of course.
Now, trauma is a big thing that you talk about in your lectures and helping homeopaths understand the relationship of trauma and what we see in the clinic. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, a little bit of a context. I mean, so many of our...
Today's guest is technically a return guest. It is the lovely Adam Fiore of the Montreal Institute of Classical Homeopathy. Now, I say technically because this is the first time I've interviewed him on the podcast, but we do have two of his previous lectures that were gifted during our holiday series, and that was episode 246 and episode 345. So one was on child case taking and the other one was on trauma. And we talk a bit more about trauma today because it is a topic that is very close to Adam's heart. So Adam is a classically trained homeopath with a specialization in situations of chronic and traumatic stress. He works internationally with people of all ages and maintains a trauma-informed practice. He has supported children with spectrum conditions and other challenges for well over a decade. He also teaches at the Montreal Institute of Classical Homeopathy, or MICH, and his passion lies in facilitating inner awareness and transformation through in-depth dialogue. He is known for his dedication, insight, patience, and compassion. The methodologies Adam applies are rooted in holistic approaches to health with a focus on mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. His experience in deep listening, teaching, and coaching support people to make significant changes and strengthen their connection to the body's innate healing wisdom. Now, if you want to learn more about MICH, you can visit michmontreal.com. That's MICH Montreal.com. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout podcast, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. And now our mum and your host, Eugenie Kruger.
Hello, homies, and welcome back to Homeopathy Hangout, where today we have technically our second time that you're on the podcast, Adam. We've got the lovely Adam Fiore from Montreal in Canada. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. So happy to meet you, as I was saying in our pre-talk, and hi to all your listeners.
Hi. Well, it kind of technically it's your second time on the podcast, right? Because you teach at Montreal Institute of Classical Homeopathy, and Misha's been on the podcast a couple of times in different lectures, but there was a great series that you did in our holiday series. I think, was it last December, the one before that, on trauma?
Yeah, it was, I think, last year. I was kind of swimming in that topic, and that's right.
It was great. So even though I didn't interview you then, Mish gifted us the lecture. It's technically your second time on the podcast. And then I just have to say thank you to Mish, because recently I was at the Unleashing Homeopathy conference in Bali, and one of your past students gave me this great little book. So I've got my own Mish book with my name on it. Look at that.
You're in our hearts thinking about you.
And it has been well used. So thank you, Team Mish. I appreciate it.
A sincere pleasure. Of course, Julianne, our founder, McNamara, and has been on your show. And yeah, she's designed the logo. Yeah, 20 years ago, actually.
Really?
20 years, yeah.
That's a beautiful logo. I love it.
Beautiful, deep story behind it. But anyhow, we're happy that you have one.
Yeah, well, you've probably listened to the podcast before, and we have this thing where nobody gets to go past this one. You have to tell us how you were first introduced to homeopathy. So tell us your story.
Yeah, the short version of the long, well, we'll see how short or long it goes. But I was thinking about that today a little bit, actually. My mom, who's an absolutely wonderful person, when I had no knowledge of the wonderful world of natural medicine, got me on the path, really. And it was through a shocking traumatic illness that led, event that led to my body expressing in a disease, if you will. At that time, I think I was 16, and the advice we got from the practitioners at that time, the doctors at that time, was a little somber, to say the least. And she brought me to homeopaths and Chinese doctors and kind of got me on the road, really. At that time, I didn't realize what I was taking or, and the philosophy behind it, of course, but it really sparked a whole healing journey from the age of 16 and up until now and ongoing, of course. Yeah.
That's incredible. Did you study straight out of school or was it just down the track?
No. So I'm a musician. I came to Montreal. I'm in Montreal, as you mentioned. So I came to Montreal. I was born I grew up in Ontario, came to Montreal and studied electroacoustic music and performed and, did that for many years. And at some point, was using natural medicine and studying sound healing and was fascinated by spirituality and meditation since my teen years. And homeopathy kind of dropped in because I had used it in my own healing path, of course. And some of my mentors, who are the directors of Mish, were, supporting me. And I met them here and transitioned, and did a few years of naturopathic study and Chinese medicine study. And then they said, how about you come and do homeopathy? So they had founded Mish and were running the school. And so I hopped into the program, and now I'm a part of the team.
Wow, that's beautiful. Also, we have quite a few homeopaths who are musicians as well. And I have said this for a few years on the podcast now, but you guys all need to go get together and create like a tune that we release for like Homeopathy Awareness Week. And you can like use it to raise funds on, I don't know, Spotify or something and donate it to homeopathic charity. But I think that would be really fun. Do you still make music?
I do, not as much as I'd like. I have 2 wonderful children, so that takes up time. And life being life, it's kind of evolved, but definitely always dipping my hands on some music, something to do with music and creating all. Yeah.
Amazing. Now, trauma is a big thing that you talk about in your lectures and helping homeopaths understand, the relationship of trauma and what we see in the clinic. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that? I would just like to throw you right in the deep end.
Yeah, sure. Well, a little bit of a context. I mean, so many of our wonderful leading minds in homeopathy have obviously written about trauma from a homeopathic perspective. Of course, homeopaths have always worked with trauma. It's part of life. It's part of the fabric of humanity. So from day one, homeopaths were working with trauma. And my interest then came more after practicing for a decade, pretty much full time, and feeling after a decade I wanted to really scrutinize a little bit my own practice and my own cases and look for patterns and kind of look at things inside out after having, learned a little bit, and kind of felt like I got over the initial beginner's hump, if you will. And then why trauma? Yeah. So what happened? I guess, well, I also, as being part of the Mish team, I supervise a lot of the students. So I, sit in and have, seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases. So my own, and then also as supervisor, et cetera. So with that experience, sort of seeing, and then this word trauma keeps popping up, trauma-informed practice, trauma-sensitive awareness. I also teach meditation. And in the meditation mindfulness world, there's a whole movement around a trauma-informed approach to mindfulness practices. And I was like, what is all that? My wife is also a social worker. So for many years, they were getting that kind of training. So it was kind of in the background. And then we started just learning about it, picking up some of the books by some of the experts around the world and seeing their different perspectives from different disciplines, and always looking at that from an immaterial homeopathic perspective, of course. And then recognizing, oh, wow, it just seems so obvious, of course. But I mean, we see, I think any homeopath, whether they're just starting or have been in practice for many decades, sees the threads of trauma in case histories all the time. Now, whether it's ever actually been named that way, or whether that, language was a part of our training in that kind of way, maybe it wasn't. So that was really fascinating to me, whether we're talking about early attachment traumas, or I'd say more my interest is in, my take on it, more reflective of what I see in my practice is, more long-standing challenges, traumas, deep sufferings, and kind of wounds that haven't been healed, if you will, as opposed to acute, which is a little bit of a different conversation. So especially in Canada, we're usually working with long-term situations. We're not on the front line. I don't have an expertise in trauma there at all, but more so I'll be speaking maybe just a little. I think it's an important differentiation.
Yeah, like that distinction. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, so that's how it kind of came about, and looking at some of that and saying, oh, wow, I'm seeing this in my practice. Of course, if I'm mentoring students as well, they're seeing that right away too. And what are those challenges and how do we address them? So that's kind of where my questioning came from. One last little thing is then in, a lot of you're right, that once you get me talking, Jenny mentioned that homeopathic talk once we're given a platform, which is correct.
Well, I find that time and time again, I'll have homeopaths on the podcast. We don't know each other from a bar of soap. What's the saying? Yeah. And we just always find something to talk about because, let's face it, we have the best job in the world and we always find common ground because we see some of the things, maybe not exactly the same because we're in different countries, we see different demographics, but there's this underlying thread that I think just connects all of us. So it makes it really easy to hang out and talk. I never had an issue finding something to talk about with a homeopath ever.
Yes.
So do continue talking. I don't want to take you off the track because that's where all the magic happens.
No, not at all. No, I mean, we're interested also in your experience on the other end of the side of the world and, practicing and that underlining thread, I think it is a thread that is like saying, regardless of whether you're just starting your practice or have been practicing for a long time.
Do you have a particular demographic that you work with, or is it, I guess, a bit of everything, especially if you're supervising students, they're probably going to bring everything in. But when, before you were supervising, was it like a particular demographic?
I do maybe 20-25% pediatrics and kids and adolescents. And during my training, I was working in a school of autism, so I have that background. I've always had a certain percentage of my practice that I hold that kind of space for spectrum disorders, different challenges in that kind of realm, if you will. And then about 75% adults and of all ages, of course. And that underlining thread, at least in terms of trauma that we see, is I think so important because a lot of our contemporary maps, which I'm a fan of, and I can also talk very about, on the bedrock of classical homeopathy, of course, we'll say that even though we don't have to, but I'll say it anyway. Those contemporary maps they're really profound. They're really deep. And that's really what got me into homeopathy was the potential for addressing suffering at its root. And, homeopathy can do that. And there's so many wonderful disciplines that work with trauma and work with, the deeper reality of it in a person's healing process. And then there's homeopathy, which does that as well in our own unique way. And
have you got a favorite, this is like a little bit of the sideline, a favorite adjunct therapy that you use alongside homeopathy for trauma?
Well, and usually what happens, I think, as I mentioned, my experience with meditative practices, mind-body practices, and mindfulness is always kind of my go-to. If the openness is there and if that makes sense for the situation. But coming back to your question, usually I find people have done a lot. And it's usually, at least the cases I see, not a first stop. And so I'm always fascinated. What have you tried? What has helped? What has moved things forward? And what has not shifted? And that's usually where the conversation starts because usually they might be doing biofeedback, EMDR, etc., some different somatic body work, processes, etc. So fascinated to know what has shifted and what hasn't. And then we know that what hasn't shifted is why we're talking. And then you can just start there.
It can be hard sometimes getting to that true root cause of the trauma, right? I'm just thinking of some of my tricky cases that have been really hard to shift. And sometimes I have seen somebody off for like EMDR and then told them to come back. And just, the ones that are really tricky to open up and really get to the root cause. And at the same time, you don't want to blow it all open straight away. You want to go in there kind of from different angles. And that's where homeopathy is really beautiful because sometimes they don't even know what the real trauma is underneath it all, right?
And they have no clue what kind of conversation they're going to have with the homeopaths very often, And so I totally agree. I mean, meeting them where they're at and having no expectations as much as possible in terms of what they need. Of course, minimum dose philosophy all the time, what has to happen. I mean, we don't know. And I think that is important because they I mean, that's part of the whole healing energy that comes into the space, right? So, and as you said, we don't want to, yeah, really kind of push or go in, or we don't know what they need. And yeah, there's definitely just cases. And that's the other thing that I'm always fascinated by is what's happening in those cases. And is it limitations, on my side, of course, to some extent, or I don't know, just what's going on there. And so thankfully for the clients and who we can have long-term relationships with, I mean, what a blessing for the clients who come back for any numerous reasons. And yeah, we can see our art and medicine over a long period of time. And I think that's really, really important as practitioners.
Yeah, it's the best part of the job. My clients that I've had for years, I just love it. Like the relationship that you have with your homeopath is so unlike any relationship in your life because they're the ones, that have seen all the things that you've gone through, that you've shared things that you've not shared with anybody else. And we're the ones at the end of the day that can put all the little pieces together because our clients tell us things they never tell anyone else. And because we have it all documented, you are able to put all the little threads together. And yeah, it's pretty magical. I just want to
Absolutely.
check, Adam, is there like a particular way that you approach trauma in your clinic or a particular prescribing method or questioning style, or how do you like to approach that in your clinic and with your students, like when you're coaching your students as well?
Yeah, thank you. So maybe three things that come up. I'll see if I can remember them. You just inspired me. You were saying that because I do the same thing is, especially for those tough and tricky cases. I mean, I just always go back to the first session. First, if it's, let's say it's over a period of a year or two, a couple things have helped, but there's still, there's still healing to be had, if you will. Yeah. So part of it is we know usually in that usually the first encounter, there's magic. There's spontaneous, as long as they're feeling like they've entered the right kind of space where they're safe and they're able to express, then they're not needing to be anything for us. And I think, with time, like I totally agree, these really, kind of sacred kind of relationships, but the magic is still in that, I think in the early sessions. So usually I'll track back and just look for themes that aren't addressed. And I'll just look for anything that I might have overlooked, anything that or just really seeing where their deepest sense of self maybe comes to your second and third question, where that vital principle, which we're always working with, really the immaterial movement of healing throughout their being is, getting restricted as it does for all of us, and sort of seeing what's around that, So at Mish, then we really look at maybe just to simplify kind of 3 S's, which is susceptibility, sensation, and striving. Susceptibility, of course, all homeopaths use forever and always. It's our guiding light. Sensation is really the deep inspiration through Dr. Sankaran and all the Bombay homeopaths, etc., who brought the vital sensation method into the world of homeopathy. And then the striving is another angle. So at Mish, we teach our students to, first and foremost, not be thinking in terms of trauma, of course, pathology, and, first sitting in the larger immaterial understanding of what moves a human being, what kind of trouble do we get ourselves in, how might we be contributing, or what the person has gone through that they weren't able to integrate, et cetera, through those kind of 3 S's. And then, in more advanced years, we'll look at, phenomena such as the trauma and from many different facets and angles. And
so when you say striving, is it like where the client wants to be? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to speak about the striving. Very often in look at Buddhist teachings, for example, I did want to bring in that. It is a lot of how I listen to cases, actually, because as I mentioned, my fascination with Buddhism and meditation and stuff. But anyhow, the striving then can be understood in that sense. What is continuing to where the person is most grasping, what are they most attached to? What are they most, it's not necessarily, it's not a good or a bad thing, but where's their whole what is their whole movement in life? What's moving them forward? And so, for example, like in the periodic table, we know through the more contemporary maps of themes that we have these wonderful rows. And in certain cases, not in all cases, but in certain cases, we can, of course, the work of Jan Schulten and all the masters have, shown us that a row 5 striving, the individual will be looking at the world around them and wanting to make change and wanting to perform at a high level and shine and create new things that are new and research and all these themes that we know point to the dynamic and the movement of row 5. So there's that kind of striving, really what moves us in a very deep way. And we all need to be moved and have purpose, of course, to stay well. It just seems to be the movement of evolution. And then there's another kind of striving. And in a Buddhist kind of sense, it's once again, it's not good to wrong, right? It's not polarity of bad or good, but it's more, are there aspects of that? Yeah, are there attachments in those areas of your life that are maybe leading to a lot of chronic unhappiness or dissatisfaction and et cetera? And then the other striving, which is, I think, maybe a bit unique to Mish, and maybe, definitely Julianne would be the one to speak more about this, but I'll try to capture it a little bit. Certain homeopaths, Dr. Mazzi, an Argentinian homeopath, and a number of French homeopaths, Guy Lutin, a number of other homeopaths, Per Niesgaard, we're working with an understanding of homeopathy, of course, and then through an understanding of what the human being is striving for in what we call in an absolute way. So there's a lot of parallels with the other maps more homeopaths are familiar with, but whether that's a striving, for example, for more like a symbolic striving. So whether it's for power or, for beauty or for creativity. And there's a whole teaching at Mish around some of those maps from those different homeopaths.
Oh. Do any of them speak English? Any of the Argentinian or French homeopaths that you just mentioned?
This maybe one of the limitations is that the materia medicas are, not often, for a lot of us who are more comfortable in English, there's some challenges there. Okay. But it's a whole system, and like all the beautiful systems that we have available to us, we don't use them all the time. And coming back to that question, what do we use with trauma? Maybe it's also just a very gentle nervine complex to help them sleep a bit better in low potency, fantastic as we explore whatever else needs to be explored to come to a unicist remedy. So kind of use it all at Mish. Yeah.
That's the way to go these days. Yeah, we do as well. Yeah, definitely. Like, Marcus Fernandez always says that you use the modality that's right for the client. You don't match the modality to the client, not the client to the modality. So you use whatever tools you have to help the person in front of you. And I think all of us try to get down to, that unicist classical single remedy at the end of the day, but we might have to use different ways to get there. But that's the ultimate goal still for me. I mean, I use all sorts of random things in homeopathy these days that I said I'd never use, but my goal is always to get them back to that single remedy, right? That's the goal.
Well, yeah, and I think at least I'm sure everyone, you have a lot of ideas when you start and things that you will do and won't do, and then you learn and you get humble along the way, hopefully, and just do what helps the person, alleviate some suffering. And maybe it's cutting down on some kind of substance, caffeine for certain people or whatever, just lifestyle things, if that's the doorway, whatever the doorway is.
3 weeks of no coffee here, hence having my chai and almond chai. Wow. And I tell you what, my nervous system is so much better for it. And I try not to it's not just because it works for me, I can't force it on anyone else. But so many of my clients who I see coming in for all sorts of adrenal issues and, they're yelling at their kids and they're stressed and all this and that. And I don't have energy lows in the afternoon. My energy is just stable. And over the years, because I love coffee, I've been having it since I was 7 years old. In South Africa, we used to have a coffee before we went to bed as kids. So, it's like my jam. I have coffee in my blood. But it wasn't fun to realize that really it's not good for me. So many of my clients, I think you actually don't need a remedy. I mean, remedies are great, but sometimes it's actually just that maintaining cause that you need to remove. And I have to say, if anyone's listening and thinking of stopping coffee, taking Coffea 30C, I have managed to get quite a few clients off coffee by giving them Coffea 30C or even 200C daily. And usually within about 2 weeks, they just don't want anything to do with coffee.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
It's good. And also, if you purposely want to stop drinking coffee, then start taking Coffea that day that you don't have it so you don't get a coffee withdrawal headache. So just ask me. I'm the queen of stopping coffee. I've done it a few times over the years, but this time I really hope it'll stick because it's just so much better for my nervous system. And for us perimenopausal women, which I think I can now put myself in that category, I think it's even more essential for us as our adrenals take on so much more of a load with needing to produce estrogen and everything else. Anyway, that's going a totally different direction. I just thought I'd throw it in there for whoever needs to hear today that, maybe consider not drinking coffee if your nervous system is not, it doesn't affect everyone the same way, but if your nervous system is not the best, it might help.
But it might be. Yeah.
Might be.
It might be.
Now, I tell you what, I hear this term of trauma-informed practice everywhere. What do people mean when they say trauma-informed practice?
Well, I'll tell you how I've interpreted what I've learned and read and brought it into my practice. So, I'm sure there's many other thorough definitions, but Gabor Mate, who's a pretty well-known Canadian author, et cetera, who many wonderful books. But one concrete example, which I learned from some of his work, and he has a type of therapy called compassion inquiry, which is quite interesting. And so the invitational language is a big one, of course. Now that could be through our own inner intent that the person always is the one who decides whether or not they're going to, the pace, the way the consultation is going to go, their own pace of sharing. They obviously never have to answer anything. And, they do it in a very explicit way. You're telling the client right off the top that there's nothing you have to answer, and you always can say no. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's necessary in my own practice all the time, but the intention's there. And there are times when I'll bring that in because I feel not that it's like an issue, if you will, in terms of the conversation, but more as a message of healing for their heart and their spirit, for them to hear. Sometimes you hear someone, what they've gone through, and just to reflect back to them that it's, really a safe space. It's at their pace. It's invitational. And once again, coming back to what we were saying before, not everyone, at least in Canada, knows exactly what they're getting into when they come see a homeopath.
Same,
right? Right. So, okay. So, they've maybe, if we think of the levels in terms of Sankaran system as an example, maybe in their own life and process and wonderful other work they've done, maybe they've just gone to level 3 and talked about level 4 theoretically, which means they haven't experienced the level of delusion or fear. And so that means their body is disconnected from it completely. So if you go into it, their body is going to have an immediate stress response immediately and vital sensations underneath that, obviously depending on the topic and what it symbolizes to them. And so anyhow, coming back to your initial question, I think that's one important thing, invitational language, that intent that it's a sacred space, that they lead the way. Yeah, is that helpful?
Yeah, it is. It's interesting because I feel like as homeopaths, we almost do that. I mean, I can't speak generally, but we get taught to hold space in a way that it almost does all of that naturally without having to say the words directly, specifically, like you don't have to answer any questions, you don't have to this or that. This is a safe space. I think most of us hold the ideal for us is to hold space in a way that we don't need to explicitly say those words. The way in which we hold space implies that they are in a safe environment. But like you say, sometimes somebody who might in their lifetime never have had the opportunity to know what it feels to be safe, you might have to explicitly say those words that you don't have to answer this, you don't need to. Because I'm thinking of the times that I've had to say that to clients, and maybe I can count that on one hand where I've had to say, look, you don't have to answer if it's not comfortable. I don't usually have to say that because the way in which we ask questions or say things generally, I think people generally feel safe. I mean, this is a gross generalization, but that's certainly what I try to do in my practice, is create a space for them to be able to express whatever it is that they need to.
I couldn't agree more. I think we all follow Hahnemann's directives, and as much as possible, and paraphrasing here, but, a non-judgmental, individualizing space that's sitting in an immaterial container. I think the psychological approaches, which are more than valid and have their own reasons for doing what they do, or the approaches that work more just on that dimension. Yeah, so there's a bit more maybe of a need in those kind of contexts, but I would agree as homeopaths. So I was taking in a lot of the approaches, and a lot of them are maybe, from psychiatrists, psychologists, et cetera, seeing where they sit in cases, et cetera. And I couldn't agree more. I think I was really surprised because same thing, I can count on one hand. Then coming back to your question, the trauma-sensitive practice, I think also a lot of it is what we're taught in terms of, once again, the space that we hold, a non-discriminatory space, a space that is non-judgmental in the sense that it's completely individualizing, and we're not listening on a personal level. I guess that's maybe the way to say it, because we're not listening in a personal level. We're listening to a movement, to an energetic pattern, to this unique expression in front of it. Like, I think all of that space holding that we all do as homeopaths naturally is safe. And that's amazing that it's safe. So I think we're already there as homeopaths. I think there's some subtleties and maybe when we're starting, some things that are helpful to hear.
Yeah, beautiful. So I think we've kind of been doing trauma-informed practice without having had a label on it as homeopaths. But in saying that, there's always room for improvement for all of us, hey? And just learning about better ways to do it, especially because it feels like trauma is such a buzzword.
Yeah, I know.
I don't like saying buzzword, but it's a good thing because people feel like they have permission these days to kind of express it in a bigger way, or like it's something that's much easier to talk about, which, it wasn't previous years. So it's a good thing. And yeah, I guess we can all learn how to better approach this and hold space for our clients. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you mentioned that, you reminded me the tendency sometimes we see to, when it's very positive. I agree, socially and in a universal sense for humans to speak about these things that they go through, which are really unfortunate to say the least. And then also we don't want to get stuck at that level of story. And then we know that as homeopaths. And that's a huge thing that we offer, that we're wanting, the simillimum, if that's what we're doing in that situation. I mean, how do we know that it works? Is that the story gets rewritten.
Yeah.
The pain and trauma is that they're stuck in the vortex of a story that just keeps getting re-traumatized. And so some of the teachings then that I was really inspired by, maybe you as well, and I'm sure many other homeopaths, in terms of the different levels of approach that many homeopaths speak about in different ways, but maybe specifically to the vital sensation method of Dr. Sankaran, is the delusion and the sensation levels. And, a lot of the experts and, top experts around the world around trauma talk about how it's lodged in the energetic level. And they use this language and they'll call, that it's remembered, or in terms of heartbreaking and gut-wrenching sensations that the body holds, and that energetic approaches are needed. And as we know in homeopathy, like, well, wait a minute, we have a whole methodology that about every frequency of vital sensation to extreme detail, that it's just so amazing, So
I think the world's waking up to homeopathy. Like, there's so many of these new things that people are discovering. It's like, we've been doing this for 200 years. Like, welcome to the party, everyone. Like, this is literally what we do. It would actually be good for our listeners to go back to episode 345, which is that one that you did on trauma and case taking, because I think you talked a bit more about vital sensation and things in there as well. So I just had a little look. It was 345. That's a good number. So episode 345, go listen to that one, everyone. But it's interesting to say about that trauma and the re-looping and the rehashing of it, because that's why I'm sure every homeopath will be able to tell you that they've had a client that have said to them, you've helped me more than my 10 years of therapy or 20 years of therapy. I've had a client who said she's been going to therapy or counselor, psychologist for 20 years and not been able to have the breakthrough that they've had with a homeopathic remedy, because once that loop, that energetic stuckness in the vital force has been brought to the consciousness during a consultation, you then give a remedy to help the vital force to help release that, then you can move on. And it's probably not going to be your only trauma. There's probably going to be lots, but as we're working through all of them, and it's a continuing process. I mean, I think that's why we incarnate into this planet. If we had nothing to heal, why would we bother coming back?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the beauty of homeopathy. We've got something that we can give you to kind of move you along, get you out of that state, learn from that, like not just get over it or just suppress that lesson or whatever, but have it brought to the surface, realize the lesson that you got out of it and how that's helped you and shaped you in a way, and then move on.
Yeah, and we all need that help sometimes, and the ability of the simillimum to quiet down the frequencies of that, that pain, that disturbance that's in our field, if you will. And then we see it, as we know, the wonderful in the follow-ups, when we see the optimism come through, as essential. Just the things that were just always discouraging and demotivating and lack purpose, and then lack vitality and energy, all of that starts to shift, and they can move on. And of course, their life changes and their story of changes.
Is there anything else that you want to say about trauma? Because I know that you are really into your bird remedies as well, and I'm really excited to
let's do it.
Let's do it. I actually, just this week, somebody said to me, because we were talking about grace and gracefulness and all that sort of stuff, and I was saying, I don't feel very graceful. And she's like, well, take a dose of Cygnus. And I'm like, oh, I probably need some anyway, because, my mum and dad have both died in the past few years. So I'm like, there's probably some grief there that I haven't addressed. Took a dose and just had some lovely dreams, but also this is funny. I was just putting together a flat pack, and normally I would just like rip it all apart and then and I just noticed myself like putting all the like flat pack pieces together in a piece. And I'm like looking at it going, oh, this is interesting. It's not something that I would normally do. And as homeopaths, we notice these things when we take remedies. And I do like to take remedies for fun. Sometimes I regret it afterwards because I'm like, oh, I didn't want that to come up right now. But so I did take some Cygnus for our listeners. That's the remedy made from the swan. We've got a few different swan remedies, but I took a Cygnus just to see what comes up. So I'll see what else comes up this week. But when I saw that you are into bird remedies, I thought I'd have a chat with you. And so what do you like about birds?
Very exciting. Well, I did,
The feathered kind.
Yeah, I saw that you had Dr. Paul Terrio recently, so I don't have his new book, but I'm really excited about that. And quick side note, I forgot to say this. I want to thank you. We're going to get back to birds real quick. I want to thank you so much for inspiring, really, because I work with students a lot. Your podcast has just inspired like the whole next generation, and even or students who are not students yet. People, lay people, etc., who are passionate for various reasons, and they come to our schools.
Wow.
The podcast. So anyhow, thank you so much.
Oh, that's such a pleasure. Actually, I've just realized I've got peacock feathers on today. That wasn't even intentional. That's lovely. Well, also, it kind of goes both ways, right? Because I've had Judy Ann on and I'm trying to think, I've had other people from Mish on as well, and I can't.
Yeah, Carla Marcellus as well.
So it kind of goes both ways because I have all these amazing homeopaths from around the world, giving us incredible content, which is what then inspires a new generation of homeopaths. So, it's just a continuous cycle, which is great. But thank you for the acknowledgement. I actually really appreciate that.
I really wanted to make sure I didn't forget that. So the birds, and then I was saying, I haven't, gotten Dr. Paul Terrio's book, so excited about that. But anyhow,
he's got one of the remedies in his book that we proved as well, which is the cassowary. We did that.
I saw that.
In
your talk. Yeah, that was cool. Yes,
and I got to hang out with him in Bali, which was great. He's such a character. He's exactly how he comes across on the podcast. He's exactly like that in real life. He's just so, you can tell his brain's going a million miles an hour, and it was wonderful hanging out with him. Sorry, talk to me about birds.
I mean, brilliant, mind expansion and energy of the birds, right? So you mentioned it's Cygnus, as you mentioned, there's a couple, but yeah, it brings me back to when I graduated. I had the pleasure and really the good fortune of working alongside Judy Ann McNamara, who's the founder of Mish. And I was a registrar at that time and still am, helping the school out in that way. And so, but I'd be in her office on days when she'd be seeing clients and patients, and you'd grab the Dr. Shore's book on the birds. And anyhow, and Mish had a very extensive library, and that was it. I grabbed the book. I was just starting my practice, love birds, and I love that book, right? It's such a fantastic publication. And Cygnus is in that, of course. And
I have to say, have you seen Peter Fraser? I really like Peter Fraser. He's just got a way of, and his books are really cheap, which you don't hear often like this one's $34 Australian
dollars.
All
wonderful. What a loss. What a brilliant homeopath.
Yeah, he's amazing. Was it last year he passed, or the year before, I think?
The year before.
It's very recently, yeah.
So those two books, Peter Fraser's as well, and we're really, okay, let's just start using these remedies. And I think my own nature of, some of the themes of the birds around spirituality and expansion and all that, all the themes of the birds, on some dimension resonate with me, obviously. So I was fascinated with them. And then freedom and restriction, and as an overarching theme of the birds and what our whole world has gone through, continues to go through. I don't know, it just seemed to be coming up everywhere. And more importantly, the remedies were really helping. They were really helping cases. And then subsequent publications by Dr. Joshi's and Dr. Calathia's work, which is amazing, just brought so much clarity to the prescribing. So that's kind of how it all unfolded. And then after maybe a year or two ago, I started working on some material that I presented for the Mish community and then opened up to homeopaths at large, which is, just looking at the birds and how to prescribe them, and then looking at cases that had long-term follow-up and really, trying to find cases that I could speak from that would really show what's very reliable in terms of prescribing for the birds. So that's how it all came about.
I have to say, if we repertorize Haliaetus leucocephalus, so the bald eagle, if the bird remedy is needed, that's probably the one that's going to come up. Same
Yeah.
if snake remedies are needed, you're probably going to repertorize, and lachesis is going to come up. So I had given Haliaetus leucocephalus like a handful of times, a few years ago,
Right.
and just never had much success with it. And then I just kind of gave up on the birds for a bit there. And then I had a client who is in a happily married relationship, but when she was like 18, it turned out like a year or so into treating her, when she was about 18, like the love of her life was killed in a car accident. And it then turned out that she started telling me the story of how he would have been the perfect partner. He would have been the perfect dad, and he would have been the perfect this. And so it was so interesting because she was having issues in her current relationship because she still held on to this vision of what this guy would be like. And this is the reality is,
Right.
who knows? Maybe he would have gotten into drinking or gambling or, abusing her or whatever. She doesn't know, but she had this fantasy in her head of how much better life could have been. And I
Yeah.
gave her Cygnus actually. And she did amazing. She was able to completely let go of that. And, when you give somebody a remedy and suddenly a new reality becomes a possibility for them. Like they start seeing new possibilities. And I didn't say this to her at the time. If you don't know that, he might have turned out to be a wife beater. But she just said, you know what? I've just realized that I don't know how he would have turned out, and maybe it wouldn't have been that great. And actually, I have a wonderful husband right now and amazing kids. And this is what I need to. This is like the magic of homeopathy. So then I'm like, oh, okay, bird remedies do work. I should try them more. But then also I didn't
Well,
quite
that's a
know how to.
beautiful story.
Yeah, that's
Well,
it. I mean, that's the type of stuff that I just, and also why I started this podcast, because this is the type of stuff like, how do you explain to a person that we have a medicine in our hands that we can give you that will make you not pine for your ex from 30 years ago that was killed? Like, how do you say
yeah.
that to someone?
Well, yeah, once again, people not knowing what they're getting in for, but in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much in that example, right, that I think maybe points to, some other points that we came up before, but just some things that come to mind are, yeah, the pining, it's a lot of what we teach. And I want to come back to like this, what's the striving about, right? The striving is really, that's a symbolic understanding. So in that the fantasy is essential. Any fantasy, as we know, is absolutely essential. Any level, whatever things represent or symbolize, and if they have a lot of vitality, then those are the core susceptibilities. So, and then that's the thing that happens with humans, or we transfer, if you will, or keep reliving, not by accident, what were those symbolic unmet needs or symbolic projections, whether it's on substance or whether it's on a partner or whatever it is, but on an external object, basically, in Buddhist understanding that there's an attachment or grasping to something that ultimately will let you down, that isn't forever. It's not forever, but we want it to be forever. And that's a lot what we listen for in cases, or a lot of what we teach at Mish that kind of brings us to really where we were saying before, the energy's all constricted. The things that we somehow want to be forever, and it's just against the movement of life. There's nothing in life that's forever.
Mhm.
And so if that's, the Buddha's first noble truth, second noble truth, like the core of his teachings, if you will, we can sometimes, I use that map all the time. Like I was saying, it's just so fascinating to me. And then all the contemporary maps and all of homeopathy, it's not the same thing, but we can find the parallels. And so kind of here, in other words, another way I can say that is maybe listen for the all or nothing language in a patient. It would have been if only they would have still be, like the all or, and we just see the stress in it, and as you said, then after the remedy, the person comes back to the present moment and regulates and opens up to the real life that they're actually living. And that's where true creativity and optimism come from. And that's what we see after a beautiful simillimum. And then the maps, the reason why I'm just so fascinated with the maps, because they show us the way forward with clarity, right? Which is why they were brought in by our masters. The bald eagle is, in order for it to hold anyway, it might show initial reaction or no reaction, but if there's an initial reaction but it doesn't hold, if it most likely is not it doesn't correspond to the striving of row 6. So the maps of Calathea and, the other homeopaths we mentioned, so the birds of prey, the raptors have to have a row 6 energy on every dimension of the patient, or else it won't hold. And the Cygnus is more the row 5 like the corresponding dynamic of rho 5, the energy of rho 5 that we know from the periodic table, etc.
Did you say calathea? How have I not heard of this?
Yeah. Oh my God, my absolute favorite.
Calathea.
Yeah.
How do you spell that?
Yeah, just put it in
This
the.
is, here we go. Oh, calathea. Okay.
So, yeah, he's a Sensation homeopath who has actually worked with Dr. Paul Terrio, and he's got a book on invertebrates that is just such an amazing publication. And Paul Terrio had done some work too, so I know they collaborated to some extent.
Amazing.
At
Sounds like
least
someone to
read-
have on the podcast.
Yeah, and so anyhow, he's done books on the mammals and the birds, and with the sensation map, and then he integrates. So I'll give you an example that, let's say with the Cygnus remedies, this is from memory, I hope it's correct. Double check in the book.
Okay.
But there's, I think, Cygnus Bewicki, if I'm pronouncing it correct.
Yep,
There's
that's it.
3 main ones, right? So the Bewicki,
Olor is another one that I used a few times.
Yeah,
I
that's
think it's
right.
OLOUR. Yeah.
Yeah, so it has elements of sulfur. So we know, of course, we know sulfur, right? Every homeopath knows sulfur. What elements? So the thematic elements of sulfur. Sulfur being arrogant and prideful when they're trying to prove themselves. Not that they're actually arrogant and prideful, but that it's part of their suffering, that they're insecure in their identity. So they overcompensate by trying to, get respect through the movement of arrogance or pride, or angry and feeling disrespected if they're not being seen enough, and they give up and get lazy and all that jazz. But the Bewicki has the sulfur very strong in it. So in his publication, which leans on the Joshi's work, etc., we'll see like rho 5 for all the Cygnus birds, the swans. But then the Bewicki has elements of sulfur that we know so well, and then he, it's very importantly, as we know, we can point to the provings in the Materia Medica to back that up. It's not just a theory; it's from the provings. But so, this, where one has a muriaticum element, one has a sulfur, one has phosphorus. So we know those elements so well, those characteristics, and we can lean on those to substantiate the prescription.
And this is the danger with this podcast, is that I'm in a constant state of FOMO, fear of missing out, because there's so many incredible homeopaths around the world doing amazing things. And there's so many different ways that we can get to a prescription, which, it's unbelievable. Actually, one way that I have started prescribing birds more is the Colors and Homeopathy book, which I've had Marcus Kuntosh, who helped to create the work with Ulrich Welter.
Yes, right.
This is how I've started prescribing more birds, because there's quite a few birds that come up when you use the color wheel.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's why, because Marcus Kuntosh also wrote a book on birds, and because he works with Ulrich, I think
That's right.
they would, prescribe it more, which means that it's easier to find. Yeah, so I do like using this. I don't use it all the time, but that's what's helped me prescribe more birds.
Yeah, he's got a wonderful book as well.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
All right.
and there's many of them, right? There's just like, our fear of missing out, and also our challenge and our inspiration. There's no longer 10 or 12. There's, definitely helps to have those we can't, at least in my brain, my life, I can't study all the provings and memorize all the Materia Medica, but I can have a good sense of, everything that would lead to an animal, bird, of course. And then, rho 5 birds, sulfur, or as one possible doorway in, of course.
Amazing. And then at the end of the day, we can make it up as good in our head as what we want. Like you think, there's this row and that one, and this is got to work. Yeah. You give the remedy and nothing happens.
Yeah.
So sometimes at the end of the day, you just got to give the remedy, see how the person goes. And, either way, it informs you as that wasn't the right rabbit hole to go down. Let's go down this way. And yeah, that's why I was saying to my clients, like, your follow-ups is so important. I just had a follow-up this week with a client who's been with me exactly for a year. And there's a whole variety of different things that we're treating. It's a couple of different autoimmune conditions and all sorts. But we've just had such a big breakthrough the last couple of consults. And she was thanking me for everything I've done for her. And I said, you are the one that has been turning up for your appointments without fail every 8 weeks consistently for the past year. Like, you are the one that deserves all of the credit. You've taken all the remedies I've given you. You've come for your follow-ups. You've sent me email updates. Like, you are the one that's actually had to do the work, because so many clients don't get that result because they give up too quickly or they don't see the bigger picture. And when, we're not holding you into a lifetime contract. You don't have to come back. But it's just, and sometimes we're just a little part of your journey and sometimes we're a bigger part of your journey, and that's all fine. But I do find that as long as you have rapport with your homeopath, that's always the biggest thing. If you feel safe with them and they can hold space for you, and then give them some time, because really that's when the magic starts happening. Like, we can't know everything about you in the first initial hour and a half. It takes time,
Of
and
course.
things come up for you. And so,
yeah, I guess most of us weren't conditioned that way growing up. We had other medical professionals we were conditioned to go see. Homeopathy is not just kind of, but yeah. So for those patients, thankfully, who do come back, like, oh, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, amazing.
They just teach so much and get the benefits of it as well, of course.
Yeah. Now, is Mish ever going to do a post-grad? Because I just really like the way that you guys teach.
I hope so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope you do a post-grad. I'd love to sign up, because I love your philosophy and the way, you look at things, and especially Judy Ann. I don't think there's a person on the planet like her. I mean, I usually have to listen to her episodes like several times before it really like sinks in, because you can tell that's one incredibly smart woman. I
couldn't agree more. And I was with her today, and usually there's at least once in the conversation, I say, "Oh, hold on. Tell me that one more time. At least one more time."
No, normal speak
And
now,
then,
just like
yeah, like the slow button, and then yeah. She's
we're lucky to have people like her in our profession. We do have some incredible minds in our profession.
really inspiring us to move forward, and
yeah. Adam, is there anything that we've missed out? I mean, this is a thing. And as you were talking, I have these little ideas that drop into my head 24/7. It's lovely. I mean, but sometimes it gets a bit much. But as we were talking, I was just thinking once again how lovely it is to hang out with fellow homeopaths, because we can always learn from each other. There's these threads, all this. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be fun if we had like a 24-hour like Zoom call going, and homeopaths around the world just popping in and out? And we've just got like this room, and everyone can pop in and out from around the world depending on your time zone whenever you want, and we can just all hang out.
That'd be also
Can we do
healing. Very healing for homeopaths too.
Yeah. Oh, you heard it here first. Let's make it happen.
Hey, you had some great ideas. Yeah, no.
I just need somebody to make all my ideas happen. That'd be great. There's no shortage of ideas. It's the time to make them happen. That's the problem. But I think that's a good one. We should make that happen. Anything else that you want to say about Mish, or if students want to enroll still, or anything that we still wanted to say about trauma or birds that we might have missed?
Well, Mish is a wonderful institute, of course, in school. So check out the website, michmontreal.com. And there's just, a lot of information there, of course. It's a good doorway. What else? I mean, I'll share one other thing. I think it's related to everything we've talked about, and maybe two things real quick. Two female homeopaths who had brilliant insights, which I'm always so happy to share. I hope I don't, get their names correctly. I haven't met, so Annette Schneevliet, who's a homeopath, who's released some books on plants and stuff. But, recently, like as in the sensation method, me personally, I never really understood level 7 in terms of how it would, which is like sometimes written as like consciousness or, oneness, or like just very like absolute kind of language, and like sometimes related to like the CM potency in some of the charts. And I don't know. It just never made any practical sense therapeutically, like intent. Just when I just sort of look over 10 plus years thinking, how does that make any sense for the world I know? And then anyway, just in her book, she just very simply wrote that, paraphrasing here, that the level 7 underneath, sensation, 5, 6 is source language, and then 7 is actually the state that the homeopath is in, ideally in a consultation. And so the state of non-dual, pure consciousness, that kind of stillness, completely transpersonal, non-judgmental, all these words that try and point to like an energetic state that we sometimes, on a good day can hold that space for somebody. And I was just like, oh, that's just so inspiring and so beautiful. So I thought I'd share that. And because it just never made any sense.
Thanks. And thanks for acknowledging the person. That's something I really want us to do more in homeopathy, that we acknowledge our teachers. And because I'm seeing a lot of things in the homeopathy world of people passing work off as their own. And I'm somebody who I feel really strongly that we need to acknowledge our lineage and that we need to, wherever it's not always possible because we all pick up bits of information and sometimes we don't know where we got it from, but acknowledging and, passing that energy on to the people that we got it from. I love that you mentioned her name. And actually, that's something that Dr. Paul Terrio did, and always does in all his presentations, and did in Bali as well. He has got his first slideshow is always his lineage.
Inspired by that.
So he's got Paul, and then he's got all of his teachers in there, and so kind of like a mind map. And that's something that I want to start doing as well. All the homeopaths who have inspired me over the years, just have a visual of all of them there. And whenever I do a talk or do anything like that, that I'm just energetically acknowledging all the ones who've gone before me and the shoulders of the giants that we're standing on. So I hope as a profession, that's something that we can all encourage, and that from now on, whenever we go to conferences, that everyone starts off their slideshows acknowledging the people that they've learned from, because that's powerful.
Yes, and it brings us into more of a less out of the me doesn't feel like they're, doing the me thing, which is often stressful, right?
And it connects us. It's that thread, right? Acknowledging the thread
that brings us out of any ego stress, if you will, and into the connecting thread of life and fellow homeopaths.
I think there was a second thing you were going to mention.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll name and I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
I am that kind of person. Deborah Collins, wonderful homeopath who many of your listeners might know, who has published some books and has a ton of experience. And anyhow, I was listening. Now, once again, I'm not great at direct quotes, but it's sort of how I've morphed what I heard. So, but anyhow, what I heard her say and how it touched me was talking about, and it just seems so brilliant because it's so like just naming like the thing we all know. But anyhow, so she talked about like a stress, what we listen for is core root energetic stress patterns, right? So, and once again, my hands are doing this. So there's a sense that there isn't it's not an open system. It's a closed stress system. And in that closed stress system, it's the opposite of what the medicines we use, which is ultra diluted medicines. And so she was describing what she was describing, but what I got out of it was just like, oh, of course, the healing is bringing somebody out of a fixed, if you will, compressed state and into an ultra diluted state, and the remedies, of course, an ultra diluted state, and all of consciousness and everything that every spiritual tradition has ever, passed along is that there is no me and you, etc., and all those profound insights. But
I've never thought about it that way. That makes a lot of sense.
I don't know. It was just like diluted, and so a lot of there's like kind of when we listen to people, we're listening for where they're. Yeah, like in your example, the person who was, had the fantasies or whatever we're tripping out on is not ultra diluted. It's really suffering. We're kind of caught into this like idea in our head very, very often. And we listen a lot for the ideas people have in their heads, and the ideas cause a lot of suffering. But the ultra diluted is like when your client said that they came back, and saw her, and like anyhow. So that was
a different light. I love that. That's beautiful. I want to go hunt down that quote that she said.
Yeah,
it's also at the same time, when somebody says something and it just like makes sense to you on a I've never thought about it that way. That makes complete sense what you're saying. I have to say, I've been trying to get Deborah on the podcast for a little while, so we've had emails back and forth over the years because I actually watched some DVD lectures of her when I was studying 15 years ago in New Zealand because she lived there for a while. So our paths never physically crossed, but I did watch DVD lectures back in the day. It wasn't tape deck, it was DVDs. But I know she's been around for ages and doing incredible work as well. But once again, another incredible mind that we have in our profession. We're so lucky. Mm-hmm. Adam, it's been lovely hanging out with you. I like I said, my Canadian trip it got interrupted many years ago because I was meant to go back I had a 1-year visa. I worked in Canada for a year, loved it. And then the year I was there was actually the year that they changed it so you could get a 2nd-year visa. So I paid my $500, got my 2nd-year visa, but I went to South Africa on holiday in the meantime, just in between. Met my husband, got engaged a week later, got married 6 weeks after that, and that was 17 years ago. And so I never got to go back for my second year of my visa. So I feel I have unfinished business in Canada. I have to go back. So yeah, I really hope I can come hang out with Mish physically sometime. If you've got any conferences coming up, or if you've got any excuse for me to come over there, that
Oh, yes, we
written off
will.
as a
Yeah,
business expense, that's even better. But I would love to
exactly.
come hang out with you guys over there and just come see all
Yeah.
the amazing work that you're
Yeah.
doing. But I love speaking with any of your lecturers that have been on. And once again, thank you for my beautiful notebook. I really appreciate it. I couldn't believe that my name was on it as well. It was so special.
Yeah.
There may or may
Great
not
talking
have been
to
tears on
you.
presentation. Thank you.
Thoughtful bunch at Mish. It's a
Ah,
pleasure to that team. And yeah, it's great to speak to you. Thank you. It was really fun.
lovely. Chat soon.
All right.
Bye.